Okay, folks, let's go ahead and get started. I'm Donald Hall from the Department of English and a member of the Strategic Planning Council, and we are here today to gather feedback on the strategic plan for the entire WVU system, including divisional campuses, extension, farms, and health sciences. On October 11th, as many of you know, the President presented the draft strategic plan in his State of the University Fall Address. This draft was developed by a 43-member Strategic Planning Council based on recommendations and input from strategic plan work groups and a variety of other sources. Our purpose today is to present the plan to you in more detail, to ask for your input, and to answer questions that you may have on it. Then, over the next 3 to 4 weeks, the Strategic Planning Council will modify the plan, and we're hoping to have it fully revised by the end of the year and presented at that time to the President as a recommendation. So at this point, to get us started, I'd like to turn the floor over to our Provost, Michelle Wheatley, who will say a few words.
Well, good afternoon. I hope you all had a pleasant Thanksgiving. And while we're acknowledging the thanks that we have and the blessings we have in our lives, I want to thank all of you for showing up today and being involved in the process. And I also want to thank all the members of the Strategic Planning Council, a 43-person body that's really gotten us to the point we are today. As you know, we're in listening phase. We have a series of town hall meetings this week where we're listening to the community. We know that people will be watching us on the webcast and also providing input on the webcast. So it's a time for everybody to be involved because, as Jim Clements has told us repeatedly, this is our university and we can make of it whatever we want. We need to do this collectively and together. So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce to all of you someone who is no stranger, Dr. Nigel Clark, who has very capably been chairing the Strategic Planning Council, and he will make some brief remarks, some introductory remarks about the plan, which is out there now for input, and then we'd like to engage in a dialogue with all of you about what we have before us in terms of the draft strategic plan. So Nigel, go ahead.
Thanks, Michelle. Okay, let's see if this works. Yes. Okay, so let's just start with the timeline for the strategic plan, which was intended to cover the next decade, but I'll observe, we have realized on the Strategic Planning Council, is really something of a template for management, governance, and the distant future, as well as just a plan for the next decade. We're at the stage now of getting input from all of the major constituencies to finalize the plan and tweak it before it is released in final form and moves into the implementation stage. So at this point, nothing is set in stone, but we do believe that we have a fairly reliable structure and that we've had a great deal of input from faculty, staff, students, and others affiliated with the institution. Okay, we'll get this right. Okay, so background is that our 2010 plan achieved its goal to improve undergraduate education. We've realized that the missions of universities is changing rapidly. We've had a lot of discussion about the land-grant institution in the 21st century. We started planning with the council in May. We've had a number of meetings of both the whole council and of teams within the council, and I think both Donald and Michelle have mentioned the 43 members so far. I can't dwell too long on these details. We've discussed the land-grant institution, and we've discussed the fact that we still owe to the state a fine education to its sons and daughters, and that we owe to the state engagement and assistance through extension. But the modern land-grant mission is fundamentally the same as the old. It's just expanded into many areas beyond the old agriculture, mining, and industry paradigm. So we came up with a vision statement and mission statement, and we tried to keep these very brief. And you'll notice from the handout that you have, we've tried to keep the whole plan readable and brief, and as Michelle Wheatley says, not a tome that you'll put on a dusty shelf and abandon. But the vision is actually aspirational and is perhaps a little bit more about an internal view of ourselves, and that is that we'll grow in national research stature. And this shouldn't be misinterpreted, because we will grow in stature, and this will enhance our educational achievement, our global engagement. It will provide opportunities to grow diversity, and it will help satisfy our land-grant mission, the vitality and well-being of the people of West Virginia. We also ended up with a mission statement, and this is, as might be expected, a statement that looks at our land-grant obligations, speaks about our need to deliver high-quality education, speaks of discovery and innovation in which the research is couched, model a culture of diversity and inclusion, and then promote health and vitality of our constituents with both economic and healthcare implications. And then an important issue is that we saw West Virginia University as a major pathway or conduit between the world and the nation and the state of West Virginia, both telling the world about West Virginia and bringing innovation into the state, and saw that as a very important part of our mission. Now, I'm not saying that this mission statement neglects our duties to our students, faculty, and staff. They are implied by these missions in the mission statement. So we ended up with 5 major goals, and what I'd like to do is work quite rapidly through the goals, because the goals feed into some major action items. And the action items are really perhaps where the rubber hits the road, where we move into implementation, and where you are likely to have some more interest. But I will move on to the 5 goals that are shown there and discuss each one in a little more detail. The first one, education. Educate, retain, and graduate the leaders of tomorrow at undergraduate, graduate, and professional levels. So whereas our last strategic plan emphasized the undergraduate experience, we're recognizing the importance of the graduate experience and professional degrees as well. We need to transform our curriculum and our teaching methods to provide our students with skills that they need to succeed for life. So an issue is that I raised in the last presentation is that we are not an ivory tower institution. There are very few institutions anymore that have that luxury. We do need to be engaged. We do need to deliver skills and the ability for our graduates to engage in lifelong learning. And the other is that we need to engage and work with K through 12, both to enrich K through 12 and prepare students for university, and to understand what K through 12 provides so that we are better prepared to take school leavers and move them seamlessly into undergraduate degrees. The next, discovery and innovation. This is concerned, when I speak of research, discovery, innovation, it includes all of the things that you would expect at the institution. The research is fundamentally a catch-all. It would include creativity, and it would include all scholarly activities. And it's our desire, actually, to grow that research effort and to address challenges faced by the nation and the world. And we need to mesh our graduate education even more with that growing research effort, and we need to deal with the growth in interdisciplinary research, because this is really where we will find support for our research, and this is really where we will be most innovative in our research in the future. Diversity and inclusion. Certainly, we want to become a model institution in the state for showcasing diversity. We need to incorporate diversity into the curriculum. You will see later on in the action items there is this idea that the curriculum needs to be more holistic and have some themes woven through it, and diversity is certainly one of those themes we will want to weave through it. And last, we want an administrative structure to promote diversity, inclusion, equality, and intercommunity and intercultural outreach. And this is something, again, you will see arising in the action items. Global engagement. Now, we realize that we owe the state of West Virginia as a land-grant institution both educational output and outreach. But we also need to engage with the world if we're going to be successful in delivering that. We need this conduit idea of bringing in new ideas, new techniques, new methods, and also exporting our own ideas, engaging in recruiting, engaging in industrial outreach internationally. And once again, in terms of global engagement and the international issues, we need to have a coherent administrative infrastructure to deal with that, because there are so many different ways in which we can be globally engaged, and there's so many synergies that we can have between those different ways. For example, we may have relationships with a university for recruiting graduate students, but we could also have a relationship with that university for performing research in unison with them. We could also have industrial partnerships with the factory next door to that university. We don't want to pursue these things in isolation. We actually need good linkage in our global engagement. And lastly, vitality and well-being. A substantial part of WVU is our healthcare system and our health education system, and we need to create an academic health system that actually benefits West Virginia, optimized system. We need workforce education and lifelong learning. These lead to economic well-being. We need to look at economic development in the state. This might be include, for example, translating some of our research into economic development. And last, we need to inform, assist, and advocate for the citizens, and this is our outreach and service that we do, largely through extension, but also through the general university and through the healthcare system. So the action areas that we have, and there are 5 action areas, end up meshing with our 5 goals, but they don't directly parallel the 5 goals, because some of these issues that we've covered in the goals cross-cut several of the goals. So we have 5 action areas, and here goes. The first is the educational mission. We've realized that we need to weave diversity, global engagement, sustainability, critical and creative thinking, lifelong learning skills, and workforce skills into the curriculum. In fact, we are already quite well known as an institution that produces graduates who are able to produce rapidly in the workplace, that are well armed to deal with the workplace. We also need to train these students to have lifelong learning. We're not in an era where facts matter anymore. It's how you deal with analysis and synthesis of facts. And in addition, we need to teach people lateral thinking. We need to teach people to be ready for the workplace. And certainly, folks are going to be working in global workplaces where they're going to need to understand international diversity, ethnic diversity, and issues in sustainability. We need to improve our retention and graduation rates. It's responsible for us, once we have admitted a student, to give that student the very best support that we can in attaining graduation. And whereas some might interpret this merely as an issue of standards, by providing students with the best resources and providing students with the best education, there is a sympathy between retention and educational quality. We need to promote West Virginia University nationally and globally, and we need to recruit high-quality, diverse, and international students. And I've remarked a couple of times at the prior fora that we tend to be a very humble state, and we should maybe be a little less humble and be very clear about our successes, particularly where we are going to engage in research and engage in recruiting nationally and internationally. And last, we need to engage with the pre-K through 12 education system. And the pre-K through 12 instead of K through 12 is one editorial thing that we have done as a result of the feedback we've received already. Growth of research. I will move quickly through this. We need to establish an effective research infrastructure. We need to facilitate the pursuit of research, and we need to link research with our education, global engagement, and economic development in the state. And partly in here, we are really saying you need to recruit good people, they need to know what to do, and you need to give them the tools to do it. We need to invest in the hiring of high-quality faculty. We deal later on in discussing faculty and staff and the importance of hiring employees of the university, mentoring them and growing them and retaining them. And if we grow research, this is an ideal time to encourage diversity in the applicant pools and increase our campus diversity. Structures, processes, and communication is one that's very interesting. We saw a cross-cutting issue in the Strategic Planning Council that we were doing many good things, but we were often doing these good things in isolation from other related good things. So we might find, for example, in global issues, that we had study abroad occurring, we had someone doing economic development. It might be great, actually, if these two things were linked. That's only one example. So what we really need here is leadership, cooperative structures, lines of communication that are really orthogonal to the line management structure and are dealing with communication. Communication in areas of diversity, global engagement, sustainability, it goes on and on. And in some cases, these might be loose affiliations. In some cases, they might be very much more structured. We need a culture of collaboration and customer service. Really, in the institution, we tend right now to be very task-oriented. And we realized that we need to become more process-oriented. We don't need someone to say, I only deal with the green form. We need someone to say, how can I help you reach your ultimate goal, assuming that that isn't malfeasant, okay? So the idea here is a cultural change. Clearly, it's not readily implemented overnight, but it would change the way we do business, and it will increase our efficiency and our effectiveness. And since we are an institution that lacks resources, increasing efficiency and effectiveness gives us some resources that are really being taken away by humdrum activities. And we need a way of creating and archiving our policies and procedures so that they are unambiguous and that they are easily accessed. We need to engage with the state, the nation, and the world. So we actually need to expand outreach efforts, and we need to connect the campuses to the citizens and communities in the state. And what this is about is actually realizing that we have 55 county extension offices. We went and did a presentation to Extension. It was the first one that we did at their annual meeting. And they think of themselves as the front porch of the university. And to many people in southern counties, the extension agent will be the symbol of the university. They are the person that they meet. And so we really want to look at Extension even more as being ambassadors of the institution and keep Extension informed of developments at the institution and work with them to grow West Virginia in every county. So we have that vision. We need to meet regularly with state and industry leaders. Basically, we need to learn from the leadership of the state what they believe the state needs. And we need to say clearly to that leadership where the university is headed. And through this communication, we can only do better and we can only optimize our direction. And really here we are looking at the needs of the state educationally, economically, and through outreach. And we need to develop and implement strategic initiatives that promote WVU nationally and globally. Sounds bland, but this goes back to my position of we need to advertise ourselves well and tell the truth about our successes. And last, we need to strengthen even more our relationships with alumni and stakeholders, and perhaps with interested industry that could team with the state. Our last one is resource allocation. We have limited resources. We need to invest our resources very carefully, transparently, and we need to invest our resources where we're going to get a high rate of return. Now, this is not an economic analysis in the limited sense. Our rate of return can actually be growth of success of a program, increased graduation, some superior performance. We're an academic institution. The currency of our success is highly variable. But we need to assess, if we're going to invest, what the outcome will be. And if it's not successful, we should not keep investing in it. And if it is, we should grow it as best we can. We need to hire outstanding faculty and staff. The people are the key to our success. And we need to invest strategically in their professional development. We need to retain them. The cost we have realized of losing someone who is with us 4 or 5 years is enormous, because you need to rehire and retrain. And I will observe that especially in the STEM disciplines and in medicine, if you hire a faculty member with the startup funds that are required today and lose that person in 4 to 5 years, the cost to us is truly terrible. So we need to develop, retain, and reward our people. We need to develop methodologies to garner revenue from both traditional and innovative sources. We will find that this institution has very little in the way of discretionary resources. Any additional resources that we can bring for our growth will be remarkably important, and plowed back into this are these issues of internal efficiency and effectiveness, and the fact that we can gain a little more headroom to invest through doing that. And the last is that we simply need facilities that will actually match our desires and give people the tools to achieve their goals. This is, I won't go through this in detail. This is more about the human investment here, but it speaks broadly about having a work environment that's geared towards retaining people and having competitive salaries and benefits. I doubt there's anyone that would disagree with this. Now, how do we realize this plan? This is really carrying through to implementation. We need to establish metrics and measures. We need to do it now, and we need to do it in the future. And we need to do these things both to see how we are changing relative to our baseline and how we match up to our peers. And we need to know these things because we need to know where we are leading and where we are lagging. And we need to know in each case where our investments are successful and where our investments are not successful, so that we might need to sunset them. We need periodic reviews to drive improvement and to follow our progress. We need complementary strategic planning in colleges and in departments. Now, some colleges and departments may periodically ask the question, where are we? Where are we headed? How are we benchmarked against our peers? Not all do this. There are some very successful programs that are successful without even having attempted to optimize their direction. And it would seem that it would be beneficial to look at this strategic plan as some kind of a template and to carry it down to the colleges, the units, and the departments and decide how each should proceed. And in fact, that planning will actually provide some of the input that can be used for strategic resource allocation. And then this strategic plan is not set in stone. It is a template. It's quite high altitude. It's very broad. But it does need to be re-examined periodically because the world's not going to sit still for a decade. And we cannot plan to make ourselves similar to peer institutions today. We have to anticipate change. So what I'm going to do now is turn this back to both Donald Hall and Tracy Morris, who is here, and hear some feedback from you, try and answer your questions. But please see also that you can provide feedback online. You can provide this feedback with your name and email address, just an email address, or anonymously. But as I've said before, if it's anonymous, we can't respond to you. I think that's fairly obvious. So in summary, the plan is going to be delivered at the end of this year, and it then moves into an implementation phase. And the plan will provide a long-term framework for decision-making at the institution. So thank you. Over to Donald and Tracy.
I think we'll need the microphone set up for people to speak into it,
yes,
or they won't be
yes.
heard on the web. Well, folks, It's your turn now. So I'm here, and Tracy's here simply to call on people, and then you can offer suggestions. You can ask questions of either Nigel, Michelle, or any members of the Strategic Planning Council. There are several here. We welcome feedback because this is still a very flexible, fluid document. So jump right in, or it will be a very short session. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Steve Kite from Geology and Geography. I'm really excited about the plan, but I'm an impatient person. And I see so many opportunities for us, particularly in the areas of growing research at a time when other universities are in financial difficulties. I'm also thinking of practicality of implementation. You know, were I to be handed 5 positions, in order to fill them before next academic year, I probably would need to have the ads in day after tomorrow. And so I just would like to see how the plan might be able to accelerate to meet the opportunity that we have in terms of research.
Provost, are you giving him 5 positions?
10?
Well, first of all, I'm glad that you're so excited about building for a brighter future. We did have a strategic planning retreat with the Council of Deans from both the General University and the Health Sciences about 2 weeks ago. We are already in discussion about the process that will be used in the disbursement of the next 30 lines. Remember, we have 70 remaining, and we have enough funds in hand to fuel 30 very shortly. We will be, of course, talking with our Vice President for Research, and we will be coming to a process that's very transparent. So, you know, we have to make sure we do these things in the most appropriate way. So just start thinking and getting some of your own ideas together, because as you know, when it comes to pulling the trigger on anything of this nature, those who are positioned and ready and have done the work ahead of time, it will always pay off.
Thank you.
Any of you are shy, I'll be happy to walk the microphone to you. Or we can play toss the microphone. Yeah.
Hello, Ann Oberhauser from Center for Women's Studies and also Geography. And I, too, applaud the process, most importantly, because I think it's been a very inclusive and outreaching process and pretty transparent and public, which is always good. I actually had 2 questions, but let me start with one on diversity and also multicultural issues, because I think it's important, and that obviously this crosses our curriculum, research, it crosses a lot of different areas, hiring. What do you envision in terms of a broader umbrella or structure within which something like this diversity initiative can operate? Because now I see this, and particularly being in women's studies, I see a lot of these diversity issues being relevant to our program and our courses and our research, but it's hard to kind of bridge and make that happen within other areas of the university. So what might this look like? I mean, I have some ideas, but based on some other universities, but what might this multicultural diversity initiative look like?
Well, clearly we have a lot of excellent work in diversity going on across campus, and it's a very important area in higher education, and so there'll be an army of people who are out there working in this particular domain. I think that certainly if I can speak from academic affairs perspective, it would seem to me that we have to elevate the diversity conversation to one that really has a very strong academic basis. And so I would like to see on the academic affairs side of the house that we have maybe an individual whose portfolio is dealing with diversity from an academic perspective and as it relates to the disciplines, the curriculum, the graduate programming, the recruitment, and so on of the diverse faculty. So, but that's not to say that's the only kind of person we would need. I mean, I think there are other parts of the institution where, we could identify other holes that we have right now.
Okay, who's next?
Jonathan Cumming from Graduate Education. I applaud the process as well, and some of the goals, especially for training our students for the next lines of work they'll be attaining. It's beyond now, as Nigel said, beyond the ivory tower. Now, we've started to do some of those in graduate education. We've run into some problems with fee structures at the university, and this, of course, comes to the administrative structures that get in the way of becoming interdisciplinary. How will you deal with these things when we have students on the campus that need interdisciplinary training, specifically in areas that would be across different colleges, and the colleges will not accept waivers or will charge fees for the programs that they offer?
So, Jonathan, I'll take that question fairly broadly. I don't believe that the Strategic Planning Council has or should bore down to that level of detail, but the council was emphatic that we need to break down interdisciplinary barriers. And these were seen, for example, in research. Fred King is here. His group looked into research. There are issues of, it's not just this issue of fees, there's issue of credit being given to faculty who are engaged in either multidisciplinary research or multi-college teaching ventures. I think it's something that's going to have to be dealt with at an administrative level, but perhaps it would be good if there were a test that just said, does it discourage interdisciplinary work? If so, no. And so we certainly have to deal with all of these things. I think that many of these issues are going to arise in implementation, which has to start in 2011. There have been some discussions on the implementation. In some cases, it's absolutely clear who the item belongs to. In the issue you've raised about interdisciplinary discouragement, let's say, or barriers, it isn't clear who it belongs to. There are many owners of this thing, and it's going to have to be dealt with by a small cartel of people who look at the whole issue and try and break it down. But I do believe that you will be able to have deans cooperating with breaking down these barriers, provided there isn't still in place a reward system which suggests that they should reinforce their own silos. So it is actually a large cultural issue that has to be dealt with.
Florida Montgomery Extension Service. You mentioned the word implementation, and that's what I'm wondering about. I know it's a very large plan and lots of pieces. When we went through something, I guess, I don't know if it was the 2010 plan or when we were reorganizing, whatever you want to call what we were doing, there were implementation groups, similar to the groups that we've had for looking at suggestions for this plan. And then that was just, those groups were disbanded, and then there were implementation groups created. Any idea on how implementation will proceed this time?
At this time, there is no plan on the continued existence of the Strategic Planning Council, because the Strategic Planning Council at best can only recommend its own continuation. It does work at the pleasure of the Provost and the Chancellor of Health Sciences. But in our last meeting, which is coming up in a few days' time, it is likely that we will suggest that the Strategic Planning Council remains on in a role of assisted governance in the implementation. At this point in time, really, there are all of the action items, some of them very broad, some of them narrow. And to continue a little with the reply I gave to Jonathan, some of these are obviously belong to someone and the pathway is absolutely clear. Some of them are quite complex and are going to need basically a cooperative structure between administration and perhaps a group. such as the ones used previously in the 2010 plan. So I would actually foresee the very first period in 2011 being identifying each of these action items, identifying those which need to be dealt with immediately, and then developing the structures that will deal with each one. And we don't need them to all look the same. They can be entirely different structures dealing with each action item. But we haven't quite reached that point yet.
Well, Nigel, I think that was very well stated. In the same way that we engaged the campus constituencies in the discussion that fueled the strategic plan draft, I would propose that as we move into an implementation phase, we would sort of customize the implementation team for the specific item on the to-do list, which could very well mean that some of the folks who engaged in some of the initial discussion would serve again, but it would also broaden the conversation so that many more of you could be involved in the implementation, which is really the exciting phase of this work.
What's very interesting is there's an assumption that perhaps the implementation is centralized, but in some cases it may be completely decentralized. It might be that there is some theme, but if this actually permeates the colleges and then the departments, it may be that each department is dealing with an action item or issue on its own, in its own optimal fashion. So I think some of that will fall out as well. And in addition, although the core of this plan is probably very geared towards the general university, and most folks here today at this particular meeting are general university, it of course applies to health sciences who are doing their own planning. It applies to the divisional campuses. Tech in Montgomery has been doing planning, and at least one college is already engaged in planning. So we're going to see that parts of this plan will actually permeate through the sectors of the university that are out there in healthcare delivery and in outreach and in the divisional campuses.
And we want to reiterate that we want everyone to feel invested as well in the creation of this plan, which, as I said before, is still a flexible, fluid document. So does anyone want to say anything about something they see that perhaps needs to be tweaked, that needs to be changed, that you would like to see expanded in any way?
Casey Jackson, Center for Women's Studies. I'm interested in the issue of encouraging and fostering interdisciplinary work and scholarship and teaching, which seems to be a key part of this plan. But also, we have the reality that departments are, in a sense, going to be competing maybe for positions. So how are there mechanisms built within the plan to actually encourage departments to work together to kind of foster interdisciplinary areas?
So the answer is yes, and the answer is that departments that might seemingly be quite far apart may be able to engage in interdisciplinary work as well. So, for example, if you look at some issues related to policy in the broad sense and some issues related to technology in the broad sense, there may actually be some very interesting overlap between these two areas.
I don't doubt that, but how will that actual process be encouraged to happen? Like, is there a mechanism to actually get people maybe from English to collaborate with people from engineering, for example, in the implementation of this plan?
So sure. In terms of the plan, which says that we really should be investing where there is potential, the idea is that any group, a group of diverse disciplines that actually have an idea that is productive and have a plan should put that plan together and seek resources to do that. I don't know really how else to put it. But I don't think it's merely because it's interdisciplinary and it's not well thought out that it will immediately invite resources. It has to actually be a vision that there is some growth area or some necessity or some innovation that can be built between these two disciplines. And on a personal note, I think that some interdisciplinary studies that are between, say, as an engineer, between an engineer and a scientist, where these two people look remarkably the same, are not in fact truly interdisciplinary. And some of the growth actually comes out of two disciplines that are a little further apart. So I think that that will be in the paradigm, but I'm not actually in the final resource allocation. I don't know if the provost wants to say a few words.
Well, certainly we're already looking at ways that we can foster or incentivize academic units to come together with a common goal of, moving the recognition, reputation of the institution ahead. So don't worry about that. I mean, we're not just going to throw lines out there. We're going to do this in a very open and transparent way, and we will be looking, for people to come together to partner. Because we have to believe that the investment is well placed in a common future. And so I wouldn't like it to ever be perceived that we're going to have academic units fighting over these positions. I mean, that's really not the way we're going to be as we move to a new future.
Jonathan?
Just a little tweak, Donald, you asked for. I think under action item 2B, when I read through the original plan, I found that the last sentence, encourage diversity in applicant pools, seemed to be kind of a tag-on. I would think that it would at least deserve its own bullet. And I think at the university we've been encouraging diversity in the applicant process for years with marginal results. And so one might want to think to make that statement a little more proactive to reach the end that we're looking for.
Thank you. I think that's exactly, the type of suggestion that we're looking for. Other ideas?
Thanks. Colleen Harshbarger with WVU. Just a couple comments on the goal number 5, creating the academic health system, and just would like to encourage the planning committee to consider ways that we can maybe do a better job in our state and certainly nationwide educating people about prevention and wellness. We know that three risk factors, tobacco use, poor diet, and lack of physical activity, contribute to the 4 major chronic diseases that contribute to 50% of the leading causes of death. And most, and certainly the health systems, healthcare models that we have in this country really don't educate on those kinds of matters. So I would like to kind of think, how can we be innovative and look at ways to really start to shift what we unfortunately are so well known for in this state, and that's our lack of health and well-being, and kind of go the other way. And then the other point was in, which one was it, Chris? Action item 1A, where we talk about curriculum at all levels, and we talk specifically about things like making sure that our graduates' diversity, global engagement are woven in. I would like to also include, again, wellness as part of our integrated curriculum at that level. Thank you.
Sure, a point well taken. And on the SPC, there was quite a lot of discussion that the wellness was not simply centered around healthcare delivery, but also health education and the like, and that extension played a role in this as well statewide. So there was some discussion on that. We can look at that language.
Yes, okay, please. Alan.
Hi, Alan Stolzenberg, Chemistry. Just sort of a comment of a perception. When we're talking about globalization, the way things are written, it's really sort of the university globalizing. So it's reaching out. Now, you talked a bit about being a conduit, and I think that it might be good if we could find a way to word things so that we're sounding more like not only is the university reaching out to the world, but we're finding a way to bring the world back to the state. I don't think we want anyone to get the perception that we're sort of directing our focus away from the state to globalize, but more that we're serving as a conduit to help the state become more of the world and bring more of the world to the state itself.
Sure, Alan. We will look at that wording. I think perhaps a difficulty we had with the global and international arena as it was discussed is that there were so many ways in which we could engage with it in terms of you're looking at bringing into the state, in terms of recruiting outstanding graduate students, in terms of actually bringing perhaps funded research in from foreign entities, bringing innovation into the state, and then the outflow in the opposite sense, that it was very difficult in a few words to try and qualify all of these things, but we can try and do a better job of it, surely.
What else? Oh, Kirk.
Kirk Hazen, English department. One of your very first points was about that the previous 10-year plan had improved undergraduate education, and we want to improve graduate education in the same way. How do we know we improved undergraduate education? I mean, were there any metrics by which we actually measured that? And will there be any in the future?
Okay, so the answer is I don't think that I actually said we had improved undergraduate education. I thought we...
On the first slide it said...
Oh, okay, hang on. Let's see. No, this seems well dead. Hang on. Okay. I did say that, didn't I? Yes. This was the issue of the student-centered institution and so on. There are metrics in there. There are metrics on retention. I can't speak to them all. I wasn't part of that plan's implementation. But in fact, there is information available on the 2010 plan and what it ended up achieving, and Michelle's indicating that she'd respond to that. In terms of this plan, it's essential that we actually have very, very careful metrics, and that's one of the first things we have to do. And there are some relatively easy ones about retention and graduation, but we certainly need some metrics about success of our graduates and so on and so on. And some of this, unfortunately, is very long-term feedback where you ask, what is a quality education? Does it deliver something for today or something for 10 years' time? But we've got to create some of those loops that provide us with feedback. And I think it will be very metric and measure-driven.
Well, similarly, I was not here when we were in the last academic plan. I know that the Hardesty administration aimed to place the student at the center, the undergraduate student at the center of many of the activities of the university, and I think that involved not only the education of the student, but also, you know, the extracurricular experience, student conduct, and so on. And so I think if you were to look at what was accomplished during that plan, the whole experience of a student here in terms of their education, safety, and so on, I think did improve. And we also increased enrollment. And so one of the indices used in the 2010 plan was actually numbers of undergraduate students. Now, that's not to say that necessarily they had a quality experience whilst here. I know during that time that the university was engaged in coming up with an assessment program where learning outcomes were actually stated and measured, and I think that happened in some units more effectively than others. But now, under the capable leadership of Associate Provost Dr. Elizabeth Dooley and her retention to graduation council, we have a lot more intentional activities in that area. So I don't want you to think that because we are upping the ante with graduate programming that we're going to turn a blind eye to what we do with undergraduates, which really are the lifeblood of this institution and very important to us from a financial point of view. So we will, of course, be putting maybe more effort into growing graduate programming, but we also have some very ambitious goals with improving the undergraduate experience.
Okay, yes, please.
I'm Karen Harper Dorton, Chair of Social Work. And I want to say something about resources. And I want to say something about graduate and undergraduate education. We have large programs at both levels. We have one of the largest social science graduate programs, and for a very good reason. Social work is a profession, and our students are employed throughout the state in every county. And as we grow, we need to be clear that undergraduate education and graduate education are different kinds of critters. They demand different resources, they demand different teaching. And our division has been encouraged to grow on a revenue model, and we're at 6 locations around the state. And I think those kinds of plans need looked at very carefully, because measuring the input of resources and whether or not we're able to deliver quality based on a variety of part-time and different kinds of faculty, I think is a serious question that we have to look at if we're going to go down the avenue of graduate education.
Anyone want to respond to that?
I will add to that we have received some separate web feedback on innovations in educational delivery. It was fairly brief, but that did emphasize the importance of distance learning, which we hadn't actually highlighted, and which is a way to deliver quality while expanding our borders, as it were. But in the graduate education as well, I guess there are really 2 things. The traditional graduate degrees involving a thesis or dissertation, but then the graduate degrees that look somewhat more professional, that are starting to become the norm as 5 or 6 years of education becomes the norm rather than 4. So I think we're going to see a bit of a flux around the issue of graduate degrees, those that are research-based and those that are professional.
Other suggestions, feedback, comments? Yes, please.
Put my extension hat on this time. Quite a few years ago, we were looking for a new associate provost for extension. I had the privilege of being on one of the committees that, the search committees. We had several searches that time. And we talked to deans at special dean meetings about working more closely with faculty in the field, our extension agents and specialists who work in the field. And quite frankly, we were told, until there's money, we can't do that. And you remember that? So I'm thinking about the wonderful goal and how important it is to do. You know, we say all the time, nationwide, we take the University of the People. That's a book about extension doing that throughout the country, and in fact throughout the world, because people model themselves after extension service. But as we begin to look at this, we will have to talk about resources, and it always sounds good to try to encourage faculty to work with people who are, 10, 20 counties away. But when it gets to, as they say, the agents say, rubber meets the road, it doesn't happen because the funds aren't there. So we require some very special funding that's tagged for doing that kind of outreach, whether it's research, because that's how we're supposed to do it. We do the research up on this campus in the different colleges, and then that information then is shared. Problems in the counties are sent through that line back up to universities, either here or some other university, and those real-world problems are worked on. At one point, that kind of research wasn't even respected, frankly. It was backyard research. You know what I'm talking about in that regard. Now we're talking more and more about the importance. We are a land grant, and all the land grants are going through this issue of what have you done for me lately in my state. But then it gets down to some willingness among some people to do that. But if the money isn't there, they can't do it. So this is just another plea for resources to help people in the field doing the work and people on campus who want to help with that real important work. I know those people who've gone on the Rhodes Scholar trip throughout West Virginia can see some of the issues that are out there. It would be great to have somebody work on that. But then there again, as some deans told us when we were hiring someone to be an associate provost for extension, you got to give us the money to do that work.
What's interesting is we actually had a comment during our presentation to Extension down at Jackson's Mill that was similar. The sort of what's in it for me response when questions were fed back to the faculty. I guess it's easy to say that we should be doing that within a spirit of cooperation and customer service, but on the other hand, I think one of the problems is that generically across campus, people lack time headroom to devote to any problems other than their own immediate concerns. And I think that's the problem that you're actually alluding to, that arises. Hopefully, if we can manage to increase some internal efficiency and effectiveness, as we've called it, we'll provide that little bit of headroom, that little bit of relief that will let people engage a little bit more and be a bit more helpful. But I hear you about issues of resources. I would say we can only do the best for allocation, and I expect despite all our efforts, we'll still do more with less, as we know we all do, but perhaps try and get a little relief out of some of these moves. But definitely engagement between the university on the major campuses and extension is a very important issue, is actually a two-way street. Equally well, faculty should be able to speak to an extension agent and say, I'm coming to your county to do this, I just thought you would like to know, so that there is this information that goes back and forth.
Okay, what else comes to mind? Okay, please.
Carol Wilkinson, University Libraries. I think this is a question perhaps for the implication of the statement, invigorate curricula and teaching methods to provide students with the tools and skills needed to succeed in a rapidly changing society. As Director of Information Literacy for the University Libraries and 2 years in with faculty and librarian colleagues in enhancing the curriculum by embedding in projects that raise issues of academic integrity and good searching techniques and moreover critical thinking about the sources found. I'm very interested to know how we will work through the curricular issues for the first goal of improving our undergraduate, graduate, and professional education. And I'm sure you've had discussion behind the scenes, but I think our work may give us some insight into some fresh directions we can go, and I hope there would be a door open where we could have some discussion with the leaders who will deal with the curriculum reform that's going to be necessary for point one.
We probably haven't had, Carol, as much detailed discussion as you might think, and some of this was actually born out of the understanding of the need to include global issues and issues of diversity in the courses. But there was then a realization that many courses are taught in a dry and isolated fashion, that they need to be taught in context, they need to be perhaps linked to other courses. I think this is a large task of not just delivering 124 hours to someone, but actually somehow crafting those things to link together and provide a sense of completeness for the students. How you tackle this, it sounds easy, it sounds nice. How you tackle it is remarkably difficult. I mean, you are raising issues of searching for information. I think you raised issues on ethics in there. These are all threads that should be through courses. But in many cases, I don't think it's clear to students, just in the way we're not interdisciplinary, how this course and this course may actually be related behind the scenes. And I think it's some of that that needs to be brought in. But this would have to be done ultimately, perhaps spearheaded by Liz Dooley's office, and go down with basically with faculty senate support to look at the curriculum. And it may actually, in the end, impact the general studies curriculum, because we want to provide students with a holistic education as well as a specific education.
Well, clearly the curriculum is the purview of the faculty, and I think we have to really pay attention to what is taught and the delivery formats, how it is taught. So, I mean, certainly I come out of the STEM fields myself, and I think there's been tremendous development in terms of how you teach sciences and mathematics and engineering for understanding with application. I'm sure that would be true in all of your disciplines, whoever you represent. So I think we've got to make the curriculum very vibrant. We've got to teach it so that it stays with the students and they know how to use information. And then I think we have to be a lot more flexible in terms of looking at some of the marketplace need for different kinds of programs. I think we're going to have to be more flexible in terms of competency-based delivery of education, that we view the undergraduate experience less as a prison sentence. You've got to do so many hours and so many minutes, you know, in order to get a credit hour and all that kind of stuff. I mean, some students may be fast-tracking through various courses depending on their capability. And then I think we've got to be responsive to a different kind of learner. If we really want to improve educational achievement within the state, we're looking not only at the fresh from high school students, let's face it, a class that's now declining. We need to be looking at adult learners, veterans, people who've been in the workplace and want to come back for education. And what you'll find is that these folks are less likely to come and reside in Morgantown and experience college the way that maybe you and I experienced college. So I think we've got to be ready to change.
Okay. Anything else that comes to mind that you would like to share now? Because, again, we will be moving, the Strategic Planning Council will be moving in the next week or two to start taking in the suggestions and formulating a draft that we can get to the President by the end of December, which will be coming up pretty quickly given the holidays. Nope. Okay.
Well, maybe I'll suggest that the three of us, the four of us, will stick around for a while. So if any of you have comments that you didn't want to make in public, you could maybe come and ask us in person. And as we close, I'd like to thank all of you for your attendance, for being involved in the process. A short while ago, we tried to tally how many individuals have been involved so far. It was in the hundreds. And so whatever you can do to go out and broaden our circle of influence, we would appreciate. Come out to more forums if you'd like to hear how the presentations go in other parts of the campus. And just stay tuned. If you haven't been actively involved yet, maybe we have a special role waiting for you as we move into implementation. Thank you very much and have a good day.
And please use the online feedback form too.